Hi Hoopers! Today I'm here to talk to you guys about Polypro tubing, which is short for polypropylene tubing. So I have a few samples here. I don't actually have any 7/8 Polypro, but obviously it does come in 7/8. It's just a little more rare to see. So we have 3/4 inch, 5/8, and 1/2 inch Polypro. So again, these fractions mean that is the tubing diameter is that much of an inch. So this is 3/4 of an inch large. I can stick, you know, all my fingers inside of it to give you an idea of size. I'd say it's maybe, you know, a little bit smaller than 1/4. 3/4 is a really popular size for Polypro. A lot of people love 3/4 inch Polypro. It's a good intermediate or advanced size. This is 5/8, which means it is 5/8 of an inch. So it fits inside of the 3/4 inch tubing, and so it's one size down. So you see the difference here is just a little bit smaller. 5/8 is another really popular size of Polypro. It is great for more advanced tubers, people who like something smaller for their hand, great for doubles, someone who might want a slightly lighter hula hoop. And then we have 1/2 inch tubing, Polypro tubing, and I don't sell a lot of these. They are fun, and I have a set of 6 1/2 inch hoops for off-body work that I love. This is 1/2 of an inch. So it's exactly 1/2 of an inch. It's smaller than the 5/8, fits inside. So this is really tiny. It's about the size of my pinky. So we have the 3 different sizes here. So polypropylene is a little bit more, I guess, dense and brittle compared to HDPE. It's a hard tubing, so it's kind of a little bit harder, more dense. It's not as easy to bend into a certain shape. So you see this is pretty bent here. It's really difficult to get a little bit straighter, so it's not really bending that much. It tends to retain its shape a little bit more than HDPE. You can't, if you get a hoop, if you have a wonky Polypro hoop, it's going to take a little bit more work to get back to flat or back to normal than your HDPE hoop might. And as you can see too, when I'm trying to bend this, how easily, if you checked out the HDPE video, how easily I kinked the HDPE hoop. When your Polypro breaks, it has a tendency to get cracks and fractures, and it can just kind of crack in half totally. HDPE is not going to crack, it's just going to kink. So I have like a larger piece of Polypro I'm going to attempt to crack here. You need quite a bit of force. Oh, this did kink. Well, you can see the difference between the kink in my HDPE and the kink in my Polypro here. Just a little bit different. I think if I was to hit this with a hammer, it might crack, so we can try that. So let's see if we can get this one to crack here, so you guys can have a good example. So I'm just hitting this with a lot of force here. There we go, we got a nice crack. Perfect, okay. Okay, so you can see the crack right along here. So this is a good fracture in the Polypro. This is typically, this is kind of a crazy kink. You would probably not experience that with your hoop, although it's possible. You're more likely to experience cracking like this. So you'll see that these cracks are generally going along the direction of the tubing here. If you do have cracks like this, I wouldn't worry too much about it. The most that'll happen is it's kind of rough, might hurt your finger if your hand's sliding over it. These don't affect the integrity of the hoop as much as a fracture that goes across this way. So if you have some hoops that have fractures, going perpendicular to the tubing, just, you know, be aware that that area is much more likely to crack and break than something like this. Okay, so I also have a sample of colored tubing. So like I said, with HDPE, Polypro also comes in tons and tons and tons of different colors. This is a UV reactive one. Most natural Polypro is UV reactive, which means it glows under the black light. One thing to consider is that the dye in your tubing will ever so slightly affect the density of the tubing, meaning it might give it slightly different characteristics. This is such a minuscule thing that it's not something that most tubers are going to recognize. It's more of a hoop maker's thing to notice. So you might notice it's more difficult to cut it or to find an insert for it. But as hoop makers, we all know that tubing coils can vary from beginning to end, so it's not always that easy to find an insert for your tubing anyway. But anyway, here is a nice sample of Polypro. So Polypro is a really strong tubing. It is a little more brittle than HDPE, but because of the hardness and the way that it is a little bit more reactive, it makes it great for doing breaks, for really fast flow, for smaller hoops. I really like Polypro for mainly for working with breaks and different things that kind of have a lot of stalls and just kind of more of like a faster flow. So for example, say I'm doing breaks with my Polypro hoop, I'm gonna hit it and it's gonna immediately react and move, whereas HDPE might have just slightly slower reaction time. Say I'm doing breaks and I mess up and I hit it wrong. Polypro is going to react to that and kind of magnify any like, you know, difficulties that you're having with it. So say if I hit it wrong, the Polypro is more likely to kind of fly into some crazy direction than your HDPE hoop. However, it is wonderful for people who like to hoop really fast, to do a lot of breaks, knee breaks, shoulder breaks, whatever. It is just ever so slightly lighter. Like I said in the HDPE video, I wouldn't you know, really think too much about the weight when you're comparing these two, but that is something I guess you could take into consideration. But the one thing to keep in mind with Polypro is that it is more susceptible to cracking and breaking in colder temperatures because of the nature of the tubing. It's a little more brittle, as you saw with the cracks. So the colder that the Polypro gets, the more prone to cracking it is. So in the winter, if you live in a colder climate, hooping outside, doing breaks, basically because the tubing becomes a little bit, the molecules of the tubing become a little more brittle and I guess sensitive in a way, the force that you're putting on is going to be more magnified the colder it is. So you're doing crazy breaks in the snow, it's much more likely that you're going to get a crack or a fracture in your Polypro hoop versus in the summer doing the same thing. Polypro I have found in experience to hold up a little bit better to high temperatures than HDPE. I found that HDPE gets wonky faster because of just it's more susceptible to warmer temperatures than Polypro. So keep that in mind. I recommend Polypro to more intermediate hoopers, advanced hoopers. Beginners can absolutely give it a try, however it's a little harder. And like I said, it's a little bit less forgiving, so I don't always recommend it to beginners. However, if you're looking for something to downsize, for something, you know, specifically more for on or for off body, you might really enjoy Polypro. So that is my overview of Polypro tubing, and I hope you guys really enjoyed it, learned a lot, and now you can make an awesome educated decision about what kind of tubing is perfect for your flow.